Happy Resurrection Day. A little over 5 years ago, I released the video that has garnered my channel the majority of its attention, the true date of Christ's birth. With over 500,000 views, I'd assume most of the people watching this video found my channel from that one. If not, you might watch it after you watch this one. Then, 2 years later, in 2018, I released a Passion Week series that follows Jesus' final week from Palm Sunday to his resurrection. In that series, I already revealed the year of the resurrection, and this year, we're going to reveal why that year was chosen. So stick around. It seemed right to do the video on the resurrection this year, and you'll see what I mean when we get to the end of the video. This time of year is always filled with joy and happiness. A lot of us are just now coming out of winter. The snows have melted, the grass is greening again, birds sing outside, flowers are blooming, and the world seems to be coming back to life. God was very careful with his creation, so that it would all represent him. It was in the spring, during the time of Passover, when Jesus would be sacrificed for the sins of all men as our Passover lamb, providing us a way to eternal life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You're here to learn when this happened, so let's get to it. Most of us are aware that this event occurred in Jerusalem in the 1st century, and one of the great things about this event is that it separates Jesus from other mythical pagan deities, because we know it to be historical fact. We know who was governing the area when it happened, and we have multiple accounts acknowledging his existence. Now there are several requirements one must have in order to calculate the timing of the resurrection. We're going to lay them out first and then explain them as we go. We must know when Jesus began his ministry, when he was 30 years old, and how long his ministry was. Then, regarding the year of the crucifixion and the resurrection, we need to know when Tiberius reigned as emperor of the Roman Empire, when Pilate served as governor of Judea, when Herod Antipas was tetrarch of Galilee, when Caiaphas was high priest, and we also need to take into account the timing of the Passover. To begin then, a disclaimer. We will assume the true date in this video and provide evidence to support that assumption. The knowledge of the date has no effect on a believer's salvation, and if you have surmised a different date, then you're more than welcome to it. Virtually all scholars believe, for various reasons, that Jesus was crucified in the spring of either 30 AD or 33 AD, with most choosing the former. To be clear, the Bible does not explicitly specify the precise date of Jesus' crucifixion, but that does not make it unknowable or unimportant. Christianity is a historical religion and contains an exorbitant number of events. Knowing the dates of these events and connecting them with established world history bolsters our faith and helps root God's history within the larger context of human history. Now I know I gave the requirements just a second ago, but the order of that list was to keep it neat and clean. It's not the order we're going to take them in, and hopefully you'll understand once we're finished. I went back and forth on how to discuss this. I could easily state the dates, like Caiaphas was high priest from AD 18 to AD 36, having the role for 18 years. But I thought it would be nice to tie this video to my previous one on Christ's birth. So we'll begin with the death of Herod the Great, covering requirements chronologically, and discuss the rulers of Rome, including emperors and governors, and also the high priest and the tetrarchs of Judea and Galilee, leading up to the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. This should also help explain why the Pharisees were so concerned with Jesus, and help us understand why they were worried that the Romans would remove them from power if they did not kill him. So we begin our calendar with the birth of Jesus Christ and the death of Herod the Great. I date this in 4 BC, as can be seen in the Christmas video, and several people in that video expressed that I had the wrong date, and that Jesus would have been 2 years old at the time, and that Jonathan Cahn chose the year 6 BC for his birth. Now fair enough. There are a few ways I could defend that argument, but the easiest is historically. The census expressed in Luke 2:2 at the time of Jesus' birth could only be accomplished by Publius Sulpicius Quirinius when he was rector or acting governor of Syria after his conflict with the Hominids, and this took place over the course from 5 BC to 3 BC. I don't have time to get into it today, and it's not important for this video, but there is historical evidence that Quirinius was acting governor of Syria from 4 BC to 1 BC, and at that time would be when he would have commissioned the first, as Luke puts it, census, The second census will come up when Quirinius was again placed as legatus over Syria in 86, and is discussed by Luke in Acts 5:37. So in 4 BC, Jesus Christ was born, and General Octavian, who was given the name Augustus by the Roman Senate, was emperor of Rome. Quirinius was serving as rector over Syria. Herod the Great had died, and his sons had gone to Rome to dispute their claims to Herod's lands. Herod Archelaus was given the lands of Judea, Idumea, and Samaria, and his brother Herod Antipas, who was the Herod Jesus was taken before prior to his crucifixion, was given Galilee and Perea. Herod Philip II and one of King Herod's daughters were also awarded land at this time, but Archelaus and Antipas are the two we are concerned with in this study. Their father, Herod the Great, had deposed Matthias as high priest that year and installed Joasar in his place, and after Herod's death, Archelaus removed Joasar, who supported Roman rule, and replaced Joasar with his brother Eleazar. Archelaus would also remove Eleazar within that year and instate Jesus the son of C as high priest in his place. In 1 AD, Quirinius, who had been rector over Syria, was appointed tutor over Emperor Augustus's grandson Gaius, as Gaius was Augustus's intended heir. But Gaius would fall ill and die in Lycia only a year later. At this time, Emperor Augustus, who wanted to establish a dynasty for himself, had a problem. Both of his grandsons, Lucius and Gaius, who he had adopted in order to make them heirs because he had no true-born sons, had now died. Historically, Tiberius succeeded Augustus, and Luke 3:1-2 states that it was in Tiberius's 15th year when John the Baptist would begin his ministry. Many who have attempted to choose the date for the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, and thus the year that John would have begun his ministry, choose the specific year AD 29. However, this does not include any supposed co-regency Tiberius may have shared with his adopted father Augustus. Let me explain. Augustus Caesar died, and his adopted son Tiberius legally became paterfamilias and conceptually became pater patriae on August 19th in AD 14. Thus, 15 years later would be AD 29. Yet in her book Augustus and the Family at the Birth of the Roman Empire, author Beth Severi Hoven describes Augustus's attempts to create a dynasty in the last several years of his life through the adoption of sons. After Augustus's adoptive sons Gaius and Lucius died in the first few years AD, Tiberius was the only heir. In his 70s, Augustus left little of this potential transfer of power to chance. In AD 4, he indicated that he intended Tiberius to succeed him in both the magisterial and familial modes of expressing the authority developed during his first 35 years of rule. Tiberius not only received tribunica potestas and a special grant of imperium, but Augustus also adopted him as a son. Augustus would go on to live 10 more years, and for the most part Tiberius led the empire's military campaigns, while Augustus administered the city of Rome. Augustus did this in order to promote Tiberius as his successor, in order to create a dynasty for himself. But the question we have to ask is, when did Tiberius first hold a regal title? We'll learn more when we study the kings and the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, but understanding co-regencies, time periods when two rulers reigned together, is very important when studying biblical history. Dr. Severi continues, in AD 12, Tiberius celebrated his third triumph, the second in the space of 2 years, this time over the Illyrians. Ceremony and imagery communicated that the military future of Rome was safe in the house of Augustus. The Roman historian Suetonius expands on this event in the De Vita Caesarum. After 2 years, he returned to the city of Germania, this is in 12 AD, and celebrated the triumph which he had postponed, accompanied also by his generals, for whom he had obtained the triumphal regalia. And before turning to enter the capital, he dismounted from his chariot and fell at the knees of his father, who was presiding over the ceremonies. Since the consuls caused a law to be passed soon after this that he should govern the provinces jointly with Augustus and hold a census with him, he set out for Illyricum on the conclusion of the lustral ceremonies. But he was at once recalled, and finding Augustus in his last illness but still alive, he spent the entire day with him in private. It was at this time that Dr. Severi indicates that the grandson of Augustus was now reading the emperor's speeches and comments for him in the Senate, because his feeble voice was failing him. It bears understanding that the timing of when Tiberius became co-princeps is vague at best. We can infer that it was roughly AD 12, very shortly after the triumphal return from Germania, making the 15th year of his reign, 26 AD, using inclusive counting. Now going back to our chart, Tiberius was adopted by Augustus Caesar in 4 AD, Then in 6 AD, the Tetrarch Herod Archelaus was banished to Vienne in Gaul by Quirinius, when he was again placed as legatus over Syria by Augustus. But not before Archelaus had deposed Jesus son of C as high priest and replaced him with Joasar, the high priest that had had the role at the beginning of his reign as Tetrarch. There were several reasons that Archelaus was banished by Quirinius, but none of them are pertinent to this study. The reason it is covered here is because it was after this banishment of Herod Archelaus that the province of Judea was annexed by Syria and began to be ruled by Roman governors. Quirinius placed Coponius as prefect over the Judean province in the same year, and also deposed Joasar as high priest because of accusations of corruption. Quirinius would also appoint the first high priest discussed by the Gospels in his place. Quirinius installed Annas as high priest in 6 AD. Coponius, the Roman prefect installed by Quirinius, was recalled to Rome in 9 AD and replaced by Marcus Ambibulus, a cavalry officer. Marcus served until 12 AD and was succeeded by Annus Rufus. And now that we've caught back up to the beginning of the co-regency between Augustus and Tiberius, in the latter years of Augustus's life, it's interesting to note that Quirinius now also returned to Rome at this time, and it is of historical note that Quirinius and Tiberius were good friends, potentially lending credence to the argument of the co-regency and Tiberius beginning to assert himself. The only notable event during the reign of Annus Rufus as governor of Judea was that it was during his tenure that Augustus would die and Tiberius would begin his official reign as emperor in 14 AD. Rufus would be replaced by Valerius Gratus the following year in 15 AD, and one of Gratus's first acts as governor, or prefect if we're being consistent, was to remove Annas as high priest and install Ishmael, son of Phabi, in AD 15. I hope it's beginning to become clear at this time why the Pharisees were concerned that the Romans would take power from them if the people kept following Jesus. Since Archelaus had been banished, Rome had directly governed Judea and Samaria, regions that Archelaus had ruled. The Roman governors generally controlled the law, public safety, and taxation. Other matters were entrusted to the Sanhedrin, Judea's self-governing body. Yet the governors exercised the authority to appoint high priests so that they could rule over Judea more efficiently. Valerius Gratus was appointed by the emperor Tiberius when he succeeded Annius Rufus. This was a turbulent time in Jewish politics because the role of high priest was contended for by several families. Annas's family was only one of them. Ishmael ben Phabi would only serve as high priest from AD 15 to 16, replaced by Eleazar the son of Annas in AD 16, and Eleazar would then be deposed by Gratus in AD 17, and Simon son of Chamath served about a year when he was replaced by Joseph Caiaphas, the son-in-law of Annas, in AD 18. Caiaphas would be high priest during the trial of Jesus and would continue holding the title until AD 36. Gratus would be replaced as governor by Pontius Pilate in 26 AD, and Pilate would leave Caiaphas as high priest. That decision would end up leading Pilate to execute Jesus, knowing that he was innocent, because Caiaphas, along with his father-in-law Annas, and the rest of the religious rulers, would whip the crowd into a frenzy. As stated before, we've now reached AD 26, when John the Baptist will begin his ministry during the 15th year of Tiberius, and since Jesus' first Passover occurs well after the following events, they had to have occurred in 26 AD. Jesus was baptized, he fasted for 40 days in the wilderness, gathered his disciples, and turned water into wine. 26 AD would also be the 30th year of Jesus' life, seeing as he was born in 4 BC, and this aligns with Luke 3:23, where Luke states Jesus was about 30 years of age when he began his ministry. His ministry would last 3 years. We know this because Jesus is recorded as observing 3 separate annual Passover feasts during his ministry. These would include the Passover in AD 27, recorded in John 23, the Passover in AD 28, recorded in John 6:4, and the Passover in AD 29 in John 11:55, when he would be turned over by the high priest Caiaphas, interrogated by Pontius Pilate, and cross-examined by Herod Antipas, who had been quietly serving as Tetrarch of Galilee since the death of Herod the Great 33 years earlier in 4 BC. He would be crucified under Roman law, and he would resurrect on April 17th in the year 29 AD. Well, hang on, Deacon, you've got a problem there. The Passover was on Saturday that year, and everyone knows Jesus died on a Friday. Didn't you notice? I still have a box to check. The timing of the Passover, the year Jesus was crucified, is perhaps the most mysterious requirement that we have to define. Before we discuss what makes it mysterious, let's establish the understanding that Jesus died on a Friday. Jesus was murdered on what is referred to as Preparation Day, or the day before the Sabbath, John 19:4. Now it was the day of the preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Look, your king." So they shouted, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king except Caesar." So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. Mark 15:42-43. When evening had already come, since it was the preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea came, a prominent member of the council, who was himself also waiting for the kingdom of God. And he gathered up courage and went before Pilate, and asked for the body of Jesus. Luke 23:52-54. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus, and he took it down and wrapped it in a linen cloth, and laid him in a tomb cut into the rock, where no one had ever lain. It was a preparation day, and a Sabbath was about to begin. John 19:42. Therefore, because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Matthew 27:62-63. Now on the next day, that is the day which is after the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together with Pilate, and they said, "Sir, we remember that when that deceiver was still alive, he said, 'After 3 days I am rising.'" The conclusion is clear, that Jesus died on a Friday prior to the Sabbath day, and was placed in the tomb at that time. He then arose on the 3rd day, Sunday. The mystery lies in the Gospel of John. You see, John includes one other very special piece of information, John 19:31. Now then, since it was the day of preparation, to prevent the bodies from remaining on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, the Jews requested of Pilate that their legs be broken, and the bodies be taken away. For those curious, the King James Version translates, "For that Sabbath was a high day," the exact same way, and the NIV translates the phrase as a special Sabbath. Other translations use the phrase great Sabbath, or especially important. The contemporary English version of the Bible is the only one I've found that explains this phrase. You see, the Greek phrase uses the word megale, meaning large, great, important, numerous, or more important than normal. The phrase is expressing that that year, Passover, a holiday, fell on the Sabbath day. This makes the Sabbath much more important. Generally speaking, when the Passover fell on a Sabbath, Jews were to observe it on a Thursday or Friday prior, and that explains how Jesus' Last Supper can be considered the Passover meal. Let's read Luke 22:12-15. "And he will show you a large furnished upstairs room. Prepare it there." And they left and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. When the hour came, he reclined at the table, and the apostles with him. And he said to them, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." Knowing that the Passover fell on Sabbath that year, it is well within Jewish custom for Jesus to have eaten the Passover meal Thursday night with his disciples. Thus, the contemporary English version of the Bible translates correctly, "The next day would be both a Sabbath and the Passover." It was a special day for the Jewish people, and they did not want the bodies to stay on the crosses during this day, so they asked Pilate to break the men's legs and take their bodies down. Many have an incorrect assumption that the high Sabbath, which only occurs in this one specific verse in the entire Bible and nowhere else, refers to the sabbatical day of no work on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the day after the Passover. Yet the term high day or any similar phrasing is not used in God's law. He simply requires a holy convocation or assembly, and as an aside expresses that there is no work to be done. Further, the Synoptic Gospels do not express the reasoning for the death of the men on the crosses to be expedited because of the following sabbatical. Rather, they express that it is because the following day was the Sabbath day. There is no other reason for John to add this information other than to help express that not only was the following day the Sabbath day, but it was also a festival day of Passover, and the day following it would also be a sabbatical day where no work was to be done, hence a mega Sabbath. So the Lord's Day, when Jesus arose from the grave and defeated the power of sin and death, was a sabbatical day, when God proclaimed a holy convocation, a time of assembly and reading God's Word, on a Sunday, April 17th, in the year 29 AD. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you all in the next one. God bless.